always. It's a weird time. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Diane with Emerge. I'm here with Sara Tindall Ghazal. Thank you so much for tuning in to Emerge's weekly interview series with women running for office across the country. I'm excited to be joined by Sara. She's a candidate for Georgia State House District 45. She's been dedicated to public service her whole life, and she's previously worked for former U.S. President Jimmy Carter, and her years at the Carter Center were spent supporting peace efforts in countries such as Syria and Rwanda, promoting free and fair elections globally, and strengthening democracy in Liberia and beyond. She's been endorsed by President Obama and NARAL. And Sara, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your race?
Absolutely. I am a wife, a mother, an attorney, and an advocate. I try to, that sort of encapsulates who I am. I'm running for State House in the northern suburbs of Atlanta. The areas are in East Cobb and Sandy Springs, which actually crosses over into two different counties because gerrymandering, fun times. And I am all about local representation, making sure that that my neighbors and my community are represented by somebody who cares deeply about the community and our local state house, and bringing all of the experience that I have from overseas in advocating and representing and mediating, frankly, into the state house, so that families are know that their interests are going to be put first in our state house. Absolutely.
We are now, as everyone knows, we're in the final week of campaigning. Mm-hmm. How are you? How is your race going? And how do you see LA looking?
Well, you know, it's campaigning in 2020, so that's different from how any of us envisaged, even at the beginning of the year. But it's so exciting to see so many people coming out and exercising their franchise. Fully 20% of the people who've already voted in this district didn't vote in 2016, and I'm talking every day with voters who either have never cast a ballot or they haven't voted in 12 years. They recognize what this moment means for our community, for our state, and for our nation. So, we're just keeping on and talking with voters every single day, making sure they know what their options are and how to vote, because that's always this year more than ever before. I think it's a question and an issue, and people are uncertain.
Right. And I love hearing about our Emerge women and their stories on how they decided to run for office and what compelled them to put their name in the ring. And can you tell us a little bit about why you were motivated to run for office and how Emerge has really impacted you in that journey?
Sure. I'm happy. That's a great question. It's been a couple of factors. So in 2018, I became the first full-time voter protection director for the Democratic Party of Georgia. At the time, there was no other state in the country that had a full-time voter protection director, but because of the problems and the challenges, and frankly, the barriers to accessing the ballot that so many voters have had across Georgia, the state party saw a need for this. So I moved from doing the same sort of work internationally to focusing on making sure that voters in my home state could access the ballot. And throughout 2018 and 2019, when I was continuing that work, I saw that there remained systemic barriers that could be addressed through legislation. That's not the be all end all, but we can't solve voting problems in Georgia without changing legislation. So that was one part of it. And another part is the fact that I'm a mom of two teenage girls who go to our local public schools in our neighborhood, and seeing how year after year after year, public education is always the first thing to get cut. This year we had almost $1 billion cut from public education. And also Georgia passed one of the most extreme abortion bans in the country in 2019, despite massive public opposition to this, despite the fact that it was unconstitutional on its face, despite the fact that passing a ban like this actually put some of our most important industries at risk of boycotting Georgia. And we really put thousands, tens of thousands of jobs on the line for all to make a political point. Representatives that will do that, including my opponent who voted for this, are not working in the best interest of Georgia or our families. So that was the other real trigger for me.
Yeah, that's great to hear that you got into it for the right reasons. And thank you for bringing up that you were the former voter protection director for the Democratic Party of Georgia. You were the first year-round full-time voter protection director in the nation who was dedicated to this role. And over your tenure, you and your team's program emerged as a national model to protect the vote across the country. And not a lot of people know what the role of a voter protection director does. Can you speak a little bit about that, what your day-to-day looked like, what your team worked on, and how that's setting precedent now?
Sure. I'm happy to, because I loved that job, right? It was one of the most fulfilling jobs I've ever had, because there are two parts to it. The description is really simple. You just make sure that everybody who's eligible to vote can cast a ballot, and make sure that those ballots are counted as they're cast. But in reality, it's incredibly complicated. So you've got to work first on the systemic issues, both at the state and at the county level, because like most states, there are county jurisdictions have a lot of autonomy in how they actually administer elections. Although we are more centralized than some states, so that makes it easy in some ways because state law is supposed to be applicable. So you look at the structures in place and the systemic barriers, and you try to figure out what needs to be done to make sure that voters have equal access. And then the other side is actually helping individual voters with their individual problems. So one day I could be working with a county trying to make sure that they have enough polling locations, or that they are offering enough early voting sites that their voters won't have to stand in line for more than 30 minutes, because that's really the national standard. If you wait in line more than 30 minutes, it has a suppressive effect. And every day we're seeing more and more studies coming out how waiting in lines is one of the biggest barriers to voting, and it leads to future voter behavior. People just won't go. They refuse because they had such a bad experience in the past. But then you'll have a voter who has an individual problem with their voter registration, and they need help working that out, or they can't get their absentee ballot. They've applied for it, it hasn't come, or they received it and it was damaged and they need their ballot reissued. There is no centralized location to help these voters. A party shouldn't have to play these roles. This should be the role of the state, if the state thought it was in their interest to make sure that people could vote. The fact that it requires a full-time position within a political party shows a policy failure on the part of the state. But that's really what I did, and that's what the state party is continuing to do. They have ramped up their voter protection team by multiples from what I had. I'm a little envious, frankly, because they've got this wonderful, full, robust staff, and they're organizing. And now, because the election is really, we're in the midst of the election, the other portion, the sort of the third prong of this, if you're looking at a tripod, is observing the processes as it's ongoing to make sure that the processes are fair, that everyone who is trying to cast a ballot, and if they're eligible to cast a ballot, they're able to do that, making sure that the absentee processing is being overseen, and that's being done credibly, and that every vote actually counts. So during an election, you've got that observation process on top of the helping individual voters and then dealing with the systemic issues.
Absolutely. And that's such a key part of our voting processes. And as everyone knows, voter protection issues are sort of at the forefront of what's happening during this election season. People are worried about their vote by mail ballots. People are worried about going to vote in person and potentially putting themselves at risk. As you look nationally at voter protection issues, what are you seeing as what people should know as they head to the polls or mailing in their ballots?
Well, that's such a key word there. You said mailing in their ballots. At this point, it's really too late to trust the mail system because the mails are slowed down. I don't know. I don't want to attribute blame, but we know that if you drop a ballot in the mail and you live in a state that has an arrival deadline, like Wisconsin now has gone back to the ballots must arrive in the county by the close of polls on November 3rd, those ballots need to be delivered by hand across the country universally.
Sarah, can you hear me? I think we lost connection with Sarah, but let's just give it a minute. Also, for anyone watching, please make a plan to vote if you have not already. And if you can possibly vote early in person, if that's available to you, please do so. There are also other resources like iwillvote.com or make a plan for election day itself. You can also drop off your ballot at any ballot box or in person on the day of.
I'm back. I'm so sorry about that.
Okay.
So what I was saying, yeah, and I see, making a plan for election day. If you live in a state, and most jurisdictions do have early voting, don't wait till election day. Because you don't know what might happen. You can have a flat tire, or you can get sick, or you have to take your dog to the vet on an emergency, right? Anything can happen. Don't wait to get that ballot in. So deliver absentee ballots by hand. Go vote early. Go make sure everyone is doing the same. It's really important to use your personal networks and making sure that folks want to vote. The other thing I find really important is meeting people where they are. If somebody says they're skeptical about voting and they don't want to vote, they don't think it's going to count, don't shame them for that. Ask them why. Ask them what their experience has been and help talk through folks. Respect other people's ideas and opinions about this, but try to convince them. Everybody is coming from a different lived experience, and everybody has had a different past, and you need to respect that. And I find that I have turned non-voters into voters simply by listening and engaging with folks, and that makes a really big difference.
Absolutely. And I think that's so important. I've been doing a lot of phone banking this season, and whenever I hear someone on the phone say that they're not voting, I talk to them about what I think is personally at stake for me. So for you, what is at stake in this election, and what is personal to you about this particular experience?
I find this at every level to be one of the most impactful elections that in my lifetime. And that's that's pretty long at this point. Obviously at the national level, it's as Vice President Biden said, we're in the fight for the soul of our nation. I mean, this really is about small d democracy and preserving democratic institutions. At the local level, as they say, the farther down the ballot you go, the closer you are to home. This is about making sure that our schools are fully funded. This is about making sure that everybody in our community can access affordable health care that's high quality and won't bankrupt families and small businesses. It's about making sure that our representatives reflect us and our priorities and what our families need. It's about making sure that our county sheriffs are really out to protect the community and not make political statements. It's about making sure that our district attorneys are making prosecutorial decisions that reflect the community priorities. Everything is on the line this year. And in it's 2020, which means redistricting is on the ballot as well. Do we want representation that reflects the will of the voters, or do we want representatives who handpick which voters they want in their district? Who do we want to give the power to? Do we want to give the power to the elected officials who have a vested interest in how those lines are drawn, or do we want to give the power back to the voters? So this is what's on the ballot for me this year.
Absolutely. And thank you for bringing up community safety. That's one of your priorities on your campaign. Can you talk about your goals around safety specifically for communities of color?
Absolutely. This is such a high priority for every single family is we all want our communities to be safe. And in so many ways, what this means is having common sense laws on the books that keep our community safer. So things like some of the most effective laws on the books are requiring safe storage of firearms and and creating repercussions when they're not. It's about prioritizing mental health care. And that is so important on so many levels. More than 50% of firearm deaths are due to suicide. And so safe storage laws have a huge impact on that. But I've spent, I don't want to say hours, but I've spent quite a bit of time actually speaking with law enforcement officials and asking them what they want to see in the community and their voters in this district. And they really want to prioritize mental health care because so often people who are in mental health crisis are in inflammatory and dangerous interactions with law enforcement. And that's dangerous for the community, that's dangerous for law enforcement, and it clearly is dangerous for folks who are in crisis. So our state legislature just, again, stripped funding for community health, for mental health services, and for folks with developmental disabilities. So this is all part of prioritizing community safety, and also making sure that we have accountability measures with law enforcement. We need databases that track use of force. We need to make sure that we have a real eye on exactly what's going on in our communities, and so we know where more training is needed, or more attention, or more focus. And looking at community-based policing, where folks are actually, our law enforcement are integral members of our communities. That's what keeps all of us safe. And these models are well developed. We know how to do them. We just need the political will to start implementing them.
Yeah, that's great to hear that's on your plan. And, not surprisingly, you care a lot about this issue because you have 2 school-age children, and you care a lot about their education and their future. Can you talk a little bit about your vision for education and what your campaign platform is around that?
I am a very strong believer in public education. I'm a product of public education. My girls go to our public schools here. We need to really fully support our public schools. And that means closing up loopholes that allow tax dollars to go through unaccountable means into private schools, and taking tax dollars away from our public schools. That means raising teacher salaries at 100%, but also providing the resources to the school districts to make sure that we are closing the educational achievement gaps, and that every student in every school provides the resources that they need to make sure that we're providing kids with the best education, and creating a workforce for the future. We're functioning in Georgia off of a school funding model that was developed over 40 years ago. The schools look different 40 years ago. The workplace looked different 40 years ago. We're in 2020, and that's what we need to be doing, is preparing our kids for working in the 21st century, in 2025, 2030. So that's what we have to focus on: modernizing our schools and making sure that our teachers aren't, in the midst of a pandemic, having to provide their own hand sanitizer for their students and cleaning supplies for their classrooms. I mean, that's how bad it is right now.
Yeah, speaking of providing hand sanitizer to everyone, we are running a campaign during a global pandemic, and that's why campaigning in 2020 has looked so different than any other year. We're not able to do one-on-one meetings with people, hold large rallies, all of these in-person things that campaigning has been foundational in campaigning. And how has that really shifted your campaign strategies from the beginning of when you were running till now, and what have the challenges been for you?
Well, it upends everything. This is a small district. Georgia has 180 state house districts. So we have about 45,000 registered voters in each district. My plan was to go door to door. And with a district this size in the suburbs, that was an entirely rational way of campaigning, until that's just not a responsible thing to do anymore. So we've had to shift from in-person canvassing and having face-to-face conversations and community meetings and town hall meetings and gatherings to moving totally online. Now it has created some new opportunities. This is my campaign headquarters in my office, and that's an upgrade from the kitchen counter, because that's where we started. And this is now the spare bedroom, cum office, cum campaign headquarters. But so we're relying very heavily on phone banking, on Zoom meetings, but I can do 2 or 3 a night as opposed to doing 1. So there's an environmental footprint issue that I think has certainly been good, and I can talk to different groups in different places at just one right after the other. But I miss the joy and the energy of doing these in-person events. I'll see these video snippets from people waiting in line and having drum lines or just dancing, and the sheer energy of all of that is really missing from having to do everything in distance. And I'm so looking forward to being able to return to that, because there is a joy and there is a gift in being able to participate in the democratic process. And that's missing right now from the campaign. And it makes me sad.
Absolutely. So if you had to give some advice to a woman running for office or planning on potentially running for office one day, what would you say to her?
Be prepared to organize and organize and organize. And it is antithetical to some of us to ask for help and to ask friends for things. I find myself, and I think a lot of my peers, we want to be able to do everything ourselves. We want to be able to fix things. That's why we're running for office to begin with, because we want to fix what we see as broken. But it takes a team. Nobody can do this on their own. We have to reach out among our colleagues, our friends, our networks, and really dig deep. And you will find that when you ask somebody for something, they are grateful, because that makes them part of your team. And developing these teams is really absolutely critical. And develop a thick skin. That happens pretty naturally on its own, I think. And remember, it's never about you as a candidate. It's all about what you want to do for your community. And if that is what you keep centered in your sights and in your campaign and in your mission, then you can sleep well at night.
That's great to hear. As we're wrapping up our program, do you have any final remarks, anything you'd like our attendees to know?
Well, I want to say that Emerge is such an amazing organization and such an amazing network. I signed up for doing training with Emerge because I saw what fantastic work they did in 2018 and it's having a network of people that you can count on, and the relationships you form with your fellow candidates when you're undergoing this intense training are just immeasurable, and it's such a great resource. And that's my biggest advice, is take advantage of the resources that are made available to you. Not all of the advice you get from some folks will be good. Some of it will be amazing, but all of it will add to your body of knowledge, your understanding, and your toolkit. And that's what you can take with you. Also, it's never too early. I jumped in December. I wish I'd had the more lead time, but frankly, I was unwilling to stop doing the voter protection work until I knew I had to get moving on this campaign. And it's put me at a little bit of a disadvantage, but we've made up for it, and in part because of the support of groups like Emerge, I was able to catch up pretty quickly. But yeah, take advantage of groups like this.
Great. Well, Sara, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to the viewers who are watching right now. This episode of Races to Watch is available on our YouTube channel. Subscribe for updates from our team, and tune in on Election Day itself. We'll be live throughout the day with experts and candidates from across the country. Thank you again, and we wish you all the best of luck on your campaign, and we'll be rooting for you.
Thank you so much. And thanks for the opportunity to talk with you today. I really enjoyed it.
Absolutely.